Matt Forstater before talked about creating jobs that aren't motivated by the profit motive. But if we're talking about jobs that produce goods and services that aren't even priced, aren't even sold, but just given away, so how does that affect the relationship between purchasing power and inflation in terms of things that can be produced for sale?
So people at least have to put in the effort to work, and then you hope that they're going to provide things that the community wants and is able to use, which builds support for the program. But the response I would give to people who make these arguments is much simpler. Okay, so we've seen Japan running the biggest budget deficits in the world for a full generation, and they still have deflation. So it cannot be true that budget deficits automatically cause inflation. Okay, now we've had the UK and the US running huge budget deficits since 2007. Again, no inflation. Okay, all three of these countries have done QE, pumping as many reserves into the banking system as they possibly could do, and still no inflation. How much evidence do you need? And they all want to cause inflation. All of our leaders are out there telling us they're going to keep doing this until we get inflation, and we still can't get inflation.
But still, it seems to me that there's a difference between selling bonds, which actually are kind of absorbing money that's already out there. I mean, if all money is created in banks...
It doesn't absorb any money out there. What it does is absorb reserves that are locked up on the balance sheet of the Fed. They can't get out. That's the point. That's why they can't be inflationary.
The reserves don't stimulate anything anyway. The thing to recognize is a reserve balance is an overnight debt of the government, right?
Which now pays interest.
Which now pays interest.
It is a bond.
Right. Versus a T-bill, which is a 3-month or a 1-month or whatever. So somehow issuing a 1-month overnight debt is a lot more inflationary than issuing a 3-month debt. And that's essentially the argument they're trying to make, which is false.
Can I just clarify a question, though? I mean, looking about the sustainable investment talk, there's a lot of different projects that could be done. If you put $1 trillion into solar panels, right, and those solar panels were just installed, they weren't sold, they were just given away. That $1 trillion is now out there in people's pockets. And presumably, if there is jobs to be other, private sector demand and things, it's going to absorb that. But those two things seem to be different, is what I'm asking. It seems to be the product of the job guarantee, unless it's sold, is not necessarily absorbing the purchasing power demand that's being created by the income that's being given for the job guarantee.
The solar panels might cause a little inflation in China. They're not going to cause it here.
Right, but so that's what I'm asking: is that the purchasing power is it going to have is there an inflationary effect of the purchasing power, unless the goods are actually sold to suck that back out again?
So obviously, to answer this precisely is extremely complex, because first we have to estimate how many people are likely to take up the offer of a job at the wage. So again, we got to establish a wage, okay? But the estimates are that we're talking about probably 1% of GDP. At the same time, we're going to be reducing some kinds of government spending that are probably as inflationary, maybe more inflationary, which is that we're offering unemployment compensation, we are hiring police to police them, then we're running prison systems and all this stuff, okay? So we're going to be reducing spending there, reducing crime and so on, okay? But let's ignore that for a second. So we've got about 1% more GDP. Could our economy possibly handle an increase of aggregate demand of 1% of GDP without getting hyperinflation? I mean, it's a ridiculous argument, right? Now, if we were talking about, well, we're going to hire 100 million people and we're going to be ramping up aggregate demand by 30, 40%, possibly. In which case, then the answer is, we'll have to do something to fight the inflation, which is what we did in World War II. We did rationing, we had wage and price controls, and we kept inflation down even though we doubled GDP, okay, and had the budget deficit of 50% of GDP. We still handled the inflation from that.
You can always raise taxes.
And you can raise taxes.
Also,